Very interesting consultation closes tomorrow. Many of you might not even know that it is a thing. Do you know what a central bank digital currency is, so-called the digital pound? I imagine that many of you might say, no, you don't know what it is. Here to help us understand what it is and what it means is the economist Vicky Price. Good evening to you. Vicky, cut straight to the chase. Help my viewers understand what is a central bank digital currency.
It's a currency that is issued by the central bank, the Bank of England in this case. It's being considered in lots of other countries as well. And you'll have a certain amount that you can use. Each person can have something somewhere between £10,000 and £20,000 in that currency, which basically sort of allows you to use this money to pay for all sorts of things that you may need without going through the banking system, basically, which makes it cheaper, supposedly, and quicker for those transactions to take place. But it is meant to be in parallel with cash. In other words, with sterling, which will be issued by the central banks. It's not eliminating cash altogether, but it is a serious problem in terms of what does it mean for the banking system as a whole if you don't use the banking system when you're doing those transactions, possibly, and what does it also mean in terms of do you have anonymity when you're doing these transactions, or will eventually this central bank currency take over all other means of transactions that you make, and therefore you become basically seen as with every transaction you make by the state making those transactions, so anonymity sort of disappears from the system.
Yeah, I've got to say, Vicky, I am not a fan of CBDCs at all. For the reasons that you describe, there's a massive loss of privacy, if you ask me. You're ceding control, essentially, to an organisation, the Bank of England, who, quite frankly, Vicky, I would say, have behaved appallingly and, you know, I would say probably quite negligently. Recently, they've failed in their single job to maintain inflation, so why would we want to cede even more control to them?
Well, the truth is, of course, that sterling is backed by the Bank of England. It's a legal tender. You can use it wherever you want and pay with it. And this central bank currency will also be doing the same thing. What the Bank of England and other central banks have been worried about is the growth of non-bank financial intermediaries that have been developed very significantly now and which they cannot control. And the second is the growth of cryptocurrencies, which are used not so much for payment, but mainly in order to perhaps sort of invest in a currency and hope that the price will go up. But truth is that it has also been used for criminal transactions and hiding, where the money is going to and also where it's coming from and what exactly it is hiding in terms of what has happened behind that type of transaction. So I think it is a reaction to this and also a reaction to the fact that cash is being used a lot less. Now, there has to be a strong reason for justifying moving to a central bank digital currency from where we are now. And I think the consultation that's going on at present is aimed to take all those issues into account before moving into the next phase. And we're still a long way from having decided across all the banks, the central banks of the world and the International Monetary Fund and the Bank for International Settlements, that this is the way forward. But it could well be, and I think it is true that cash transactions have declined to something like possibly 15% of everything that happens now. They were much, much higher just a few decades ago. But is that the reason for moving to central bank digital currency?
Vicky, because before I let you go, you see, I would raise issue with this. Economists and etc. saying, yes, cash is in decline. I would argue that's not because, in often cases, personal choice. It's because we're being forced in that direction. To me, this all feels like some kind of agenda playing out to actually remove cash as much as possible from the system. So many of my viewers, for example, will say that they want to be able to go and pay with cash, but they're not able to. Signs up everywhere now saying cashless shop, cashless restaurant, cards only. So, yes, we're reducing the volume of cash we use, but that's because we're being forced into that.
I have to say that I agree with you entirely in that. You go to places to try and pay by cash and they say only card. And yet cash is, as I said at the beginning, a legal tender. I mean, your pound that you're holding, you have to accept it. And I'm very surprised. They started with COVID. Quite a lot of things that started with COVID, lots of restrictions seem to have remained since, which make very little sense. And the truth also is, yes, we use contactless payments. We do a lot of digital currency transactions anyway right now. The question is, can you reduce some of that cost to retailers and us? Possibly, maybe the central bank digital currency will do that. But in reality, lots of people now, particularly with the cost of living crisis, are looking at cash a lot more because doing contactless doesn't necessarily tell you how much you've got left immediately in your balance. And what cash has now allows you to do is perhaps budget a little bit better. And I mentioned this 15% figure for 2021, but actually we've seen a bit of an increase in cash being used for precisely those reasons. And the fact that loads of firms still and retail outlets still don't accept it is a real problem.
Indeed. You say it doesn't make much sense, by the way. It makes perfect sense to me. I do think there is an agenda at play. People have got a little bit happy and a little bit too comfortable with the amount of power and control that they had during COVID and are looking to extend it. That's my view. Vicky Price, I thank you for yours too. You know, one of the things, viewers, I just want to play this to you because we're talking about the Bank of England Central Bank Digital Currency, right? But listen to this from the IMF. This is where alarm bells ring in my mind. Listen.
If we are to be successful, CBDCs could not be fragmented national propositions. To have transactions more efficient and fairer, we need systems that connect countries. In other words, we need interoperability. And for this reason, at the IMF, we are working hard on the concept of a global CBDC platform to trade and to manage risks.
Yeah, so that's the head of the IMF there. Listen to this one as well, my last little clip for you. This is the Bank for International Settlements. Listen.
Cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that.
These are huge red flags to me, Ben Habib, because too many people in unelected bodies, in lots of cases, have got a little bit too happy and comfortable with having power. And when I hear all about this, so it's one thing the Bank of England doing this, but that's not enough. The IMF saying it needs to all be globalised. Later on at 7 o'clock, you're going to hear from Nigel Farage. He's going to tell the story about people trying to kick him out of the UK banking system. When all of this is controlled and all digital and it's all programmable, so people will be able to dictate what you can spend, where you can spend it. There's a big piece about digital ID, all kind of embedded within this. This makes me deeply uncomfortable and I reject it. Where are you on it?
Well, I'm deeply uncomfortable with it as well. And just to, to emphasise a couple of things that Vicky said, this is the antithesis of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency is a supreme mechanism by which to manage your own transactions outside any form of scrutiny. It's decentralised. And it's completely decentralised. It's not even intermediated. The use of cash, deposits and so on, is intermediated at the moment through banks. You can hold physical cash, and I'm going to come back to that, because physical cash is a use of cash that we can actually, liberates us. But this central bank digital currency is the ultimate in a regulated currency. Every single currency unit will be registered in your name at the Bank of England, and they will know precisely what you did with it, and they can do with that unit of currency whatever they wish. So, for example, when I was an MEP, I was part of the Economics Committee, and we interviewed Christine Lagarde before she took over as head of the ECB, and she gave a pretty drab interview until we started talking about central bank digital currencies, and her eyes lit up.
It does not surprise me. It doesn't surprise me, Ben.
And as a Brexiteer, you can imagine the kind of reaction that, engendered in me. But the reason her eyes lit up was because she knew that would allow the ECB to take interest rates into negative territory. With cash, you can at least take it out of the bank and put it under your mattress if you don't like what they're doing. With the CBDC, you lose complete control of your wealth.
I suppose it's worth mentioning and sort of recognising that already we use digital currencies. They're just controlled by the international banking sector and private banks. So, I mean, who do I trust more, the Bank of England or Barclays?
No, this is different.
I'm fairly agnostic.
This is not.
So what we have is digitalised use of a cash system.
Yeah.
This is a CBDC will be a registered unit of currency in the central bank. It'll have your name on it. It's not like you going and just using your credit card as a mechanism to expedite cash moving through the system. This is much more controlling.
Yeah, and it's also very confusing. So when you look at this consultation, which closes tomorrow on the Bank of England, I mean, good luck even understanding the questions that they are asking you. I would say it's deliberately confusing. But also when I hear about, we're talking about trialling things like universal basic income, it wouldn't surprise me if you fast forward a few years, you've got the situation where you've got this global digital currency controlled by, I don't even know, the World Economic Forum, the IMF. You can pick your body. And then we're all allowed, all of us plebs, get scattered a few coins that they decide where we can spend it, but only if we're good enough, because, of course, many of us will be familiar with what happens in China when it comes to the social credit system there. Anyway, what are your thoughts on it all? You might even be sitting there going, what on earth is Michelle talking about now? Are you? Or are you on the other side of the fence that actually thinks that this is a very big red flag?